Well, today is a first for me. It was 19 years ago today that I started out in full-time ministry. And it wasn't in Canada, it was actually in sunny Florida. Mother's Day, the year was 2000, and it was a lot nicer then. Uh, but anyway, it was 19 years ago today. In 19 years of full-time ministry, I have never, believe it or not, I have never shared a message, let alone done an entire series on the topic of parenting. And which is a little bit ironic in the fact that when I started out in ministry, I actually started out in student ministry and spent a lot of my time with teenagers. But in those early years of my ministry, a majority of my time, believe it or not, a majority of my time was actually spent talking with parents about how to raise teenagers, which is hilarious to me. I mean, I got paid to talk to parents about how to raise teenagers, having never raised a teenager myself, and being in my early 20s at the time, still kind of acting like one, and some things never change. But anyway, I got to be honest with you this morning as we kind of kick off this series. I'm a little bit insecure about it, and I'm insecure about it for a few different reasons. Number one, I've got to be honest, I'm in the middle of it. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I have an almost 5-month-old son, so what do I know about parenting? And two, I grew up in a single-parent household. My father left our family when I was 4 years old, and my mother was thrust into the position of being a single parent. And I know my mom is watching, and I just want to say, Mom, I love you. You're incredible. Happy Mother's Day, and I wouldn't be half the person I am without you. And I just want to thank you for who you are and all that you've done in my life. And amazing as my mom is, believe it, I fully mean that with all my heart, as amazing as she is, and even though she mothered and parented my younger brother and I to the best of her ability, our reality was I never had a father to show me how to be a father. And thirdly, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. And now as a pastor, or more importantly, as a Christian man, as a Christian parent who wants to raise his children in such a way that one day that they would choose to become Christians themselves, that they wouldn't just inherit their father's faith or a pastor's faith, that they would come to that decision in their own lives, in their own personal way, to become followers of Jesus. I've got to be honest with you, there's a part of me that's insecure as to how to help make that happen, how to parent in such a way that that's possible, because how do you do something you've never experienced? How do you do something that you've never seen modeled? And despite all of those things, I find myself as a leader, one of the leaders in a church full of people that has 2 services that get together week after week, 2 services full of parents. 2 services full of people who want to be parents. 2 services full of people who one day will be parents. 2 services full of people who are old enough to be my parents. So I've got to be honest with you this morning, as we launch into the series, there's a part of me that's really insecure about it. And as insecure as I am, and as insecure as I may be about the next 6 weeks, I've got to get past it. Because the truth is, this is an incredibly important topic for us to talk about, so much so that it's something that we'll continue to talk about from time to time, over time. So as we kind of launch into the series, I just want to take a few minutes and share with you where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a place of having over 15 years of experience in student ministries. And in over 15 years, I've had the opportunity, the privilege to walk alongside numerous families, and I've got to be honest, I've seen it all. And over the years, I've been, as a pastor, I've been able to counsel many people, many different adults through many different situations and through many different circumstances. And over the years, most oftentimes, as I would listen to these people, there were really no answers. As I sat down and listened to people share their story and share their experience with me, and they were looking for counsel and looking for guidance, rarely, if ever, were there answers. It was just an opportunity for me to listen, in many cases, listen and learn. And that's what I did. And so over the years, as I've listened to people share their stories with me and been given the opportunity to have an inside track on people's lives, I've heard just about every story there is to hear. And I've heard every mess, just about every dysfunction, so much so that I can honestly tell you this morning, nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing surprises me anymore. But at the same time, Lisa and I have been fortunate as we are parenting and as we have a blended family and as we're trying to navigate, our reality of having a blended family and the difficulties that come with that. And as we've just brought home an amazing little blessing, our almost 5-month-old son, as we've kind of brought him home without an owner's manual, we've been fortunate, we've been thankful to be able to go to some incredible friends, some incredible parents, and ask for advice. And we've done that. We go to them, what do you do? What did you do? What do you do when she does this or when he does that? And I'll be upfront with you and tell you this morning that a lot of what we're going to talk about over the next 6 weeks is stuff that I've gleaned from years and years of watching other parents parent. And it's something we've all done. You may not have known this, but I've told many of you this over the years. I'm watching you. right? For those of you parents, I've told you many times, you've heard me say it, I'm watching you. I'm always watching and trying to learn from as many people as I can, and not in a kind of creepy, like, every breath, not that kind of creepy way, but I'm just kind of watching and learning, watching and learning. And we've all done that, right? We've all watched other parents parent, and we've all made some bold proclamations based on what we see as we watch other parents parent. And if you've ever been at the grocery store, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you're standing in line and you see or you hear that kid that's having that tantrum, and your eyes get really big and you think to yourself, or if you're anything like me, you lean over to your wife and you're like, if that was my kid, like, right? You've done that, or then you get in the car and you kind of look at each other and you just shake your head and you're like, we're never going to be that kind of parent, right? Or you see that kid that's just running wild with absolutely no discipline, and you think to yourself, well, you know what you think to yourself when you see that kind of thing happen. Or maybe like me, you've seen those kids that you've come across that it's almost like they're a little bit angelic. Like it's almost like they have like a literal halo around them, and they're just respectful and helpful and mindful and full of other kinds of words that end in full, and you just kind of think to yourself as you look at them like, man, I want my kids to be like that kid. And you see their parents and you think, I don't want to dress like them, but I want to be just like them as a parent, right? There's just something in you that sees them. And here's the thing, and we all do it. We make these bold kind of proclamations based on what we see as we watch other parents parent. But here's the thing, and again, we all do it. Even though we make those proclamations, very few of us, if any of us at all, actually have a plan in place or a strategy in place to ensure that we'll actually end up being the kind of parents that we say we want to be. Rarely, if ever, do we have a plan to implement in place that would help us parent our children in such a way that they might end up being the very kids and being like the very kids that we want them to be. So the goal of this series, just to be really honest and upfront with you, the goal of this series isn't at the end to get you to make some sort of bold proclamation. It's not to do that. The goal of this series is to give you some practical, helpful tips that will help you and I ensure that we become the parents that we would say we so desperately want to be. And a lot, again, what I'm going to share with you over the next 6 weeks are things that I've watched over the years as I've watched other parents parent. Because over the years, I've seen what works and I've seen what doesn't work. And there are some glaring similarities. In fact, I would go so far as to say there are some principles that back up what works and what doesn't work. And so over the last month, as I've been preparing for this series, and I've been putting a lot, believe me, a lot of work into this series. I've read more, I think, than I've read in preparation for any other series. And I've had the privilege of talking to numerous parents within our own church family. Spent some time sitting down with some amazing couples and just asking them for their insight and for their experience. I spent some time with some of our senior adults who have so much legacy and heritage, and I just kind of sat back and listened to them share their experience and just kind of pass on their knowledge and pass on their wisdom. And so I've kind of taken everything that I've seen over 19 years in ministry, everything I've seen, everything I've heard, and everything I've learned, and kind of thrown it all into a blender, and out of that have come 6 principles that I want to share with you. And again, there are more than 6 principles. Believe me, there's way more than 6, but the idea of doing a 28-week series on parenting just seemed a little bit much. So we're just going to kind of talk about the next 6 weeks, and we're going to talk about these 6 principles. And they're incredibly important. They're incredibly applicable. And I hope that you'll get as much out of them as I have. And I want to be really honest with you. And I just kind of want to take a little bit of the stress and a little bit of the pressure off. Even though there are so many parents in my life and so many parents that I've watched over the years that are incredible and exceptional parents, not one parent that I have ever watched, not one parent I have ever watched does all 6 things well. So just kind of, I just kind of want to take the pressure off. No parent I've ever watched does all 6 of these things well. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. Okay, there may be perfect intentions, but no parent is perfect. I've seen parents that have done maybe 3 or 4 of these things really well, but from the outside in, I can see where they struggle as a parent just as easily as someone can look at Lisa and I and our parenting and look under our roof and see where we struggle as a parent. And the goal for this series isn't to give you some sort of checklist or to give you ammunition as to how to judge and critique other parents. Okay, this isn't to be like, well, they're not that perfect and they don't do that. The goal isn't any of that. The goal is to give you some tools so that when you look in the mirror, you can see yourself through these 6 principles as a parent and hopefully make some wise decisions as you continue on in your journey as a parent. Now, as we kind of continue to move on, I just want to say this, and because I know what some of you are thinking already, and just because I can only imagine, because until I had Emma and Parker, I would have been in the same situation. There are some of you out there right now that are thinking, this doesn't apply to me. Like, my kids are grown and gone, or I don't have kids at all, and so why did I even come to church today? I'm not going to get anything out of this. I'm just going to skip the next 6 weeks because what's the point? Or maybe you're thinking in arrogance, I'm a great parent anyway. There's nothing more for me to learn, and I've got this thing all nailed down, and you should write a book or be on Ellen or whatever. Okay, listen. This series, okay, though we're talking to parents and we're talking about parenting, this series isn't just about parenting. And this series isn't just for parents. This series is for every single person, I believe, every single person in this room. It's not about whether or not you have kids under your roof, because the reality is we have over 100 kids that meet under this roof week after week after week after week, and we together collectively have the opportunity, and I believe the responsibility, to make an impact, to make an imprint on their lives. So whether you have kids that have grown and gone or whether you're a parent at all, this series is for everybody, because I believe with all my heart that this series, don't tune out, this series is for anyone who's old enough to make a difference in the life of a child. So I believe that means that this series is for you, no matter or regardless of whether you're a parent or not. This series is for anyone who's old enough to make a difference in the life of a child, because I believe that with all my heart that we are all called, every single one of us in this room and all of us that are watching online, we are all called to be present in the lives of the next generation. I believe that we are all called to be present in the lives of the next generation. I mean, think about it this way. If you exist, and just newsflash, you do, part of the reason you are who you are and part of the reason you are where you are in life is because there was an adult or a group of adults or a couple of adults in your life that chose to be present in your life, and they helped shape and form the person that you've become. And because someone made a decision to be present in your life, you could do the same for some sticky, sweaty, smelly, snobby, stuck-up, selfish, stubborn child who acts just like you did when you were that age, right? I mean, I believe that we should all be present and are all called to be present in the lives of the next generation, because someone was for you and someone was for me. And so the goal for this series is to keep these 6 things, these 6 principles front and center in all of our lives as we see the kids in our homes, the kids in our lives, and as we look at our responsibility and our roles, the roles that we play in their lives. So this is incredibly important, and I believe with all my heart, again, that this series is for every single one of us in this room, because every single one of us has the opportunity, and I believe that we should all feel a sense of responsibility to be present in the lives of the next generation. And the way that you do that, and again, the reason we need to keep these 6 things front and center is because being a great parent, and this is something this isn't, wow, but being a great parent or making an imprint on the life of a child, it doesn't happen overnight, does it? It happens over time. Being a great adult, being a great parent in the life of a child doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time. And that's why what you do today, what you do tomorrow, what you do next week, and the week after that is so incredibly important, and why you have to see that time and use it with intention and with purpose. But over the last 19 years, as I've watched parents parent, and as I've talked to numerous couples and numerous single parents over the years, one of the things that I see consistently is this: that their success as parents was directly impacted by their understanding of the power of time. Their success as parents was directly impacted by their understanding or their lack of understanding of the power of time. And even though I saw this play out in the lives of so many different families, I didn't really understand the weight of it until I experienced it. And as many of you know, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Lisa and I have a blended family. I have a 13-year-old daughter who lives northwest of Toronto, and for the last 8 years, she comes home to be with us one weekend a month. She's only with us in reality for about 36 hours. She gets in late Friday evening and she leaves Sunday, usually right after church. And so Lisa and I realized that we just feel this crazy weight or in this like we just have to make this time count. And so we do everything that we can to try to foster this quality time. And so we take her places, we do activities with her, we take her to see things, to see people, specifically our family. She has a wonderful family here that she only sees even less than 36 hours a month. And so we're constantly wanting her to have an opportunity to see these incredible people and try to build some sort of relationship with her family here so that she feels like she has a family and a life here. And so we take her all over the place and do all kinds of things, and we eat her favorite meals, and we stay up really late. We often joke, and some of you have heard us make this joke before, but when Emma comes to be with us, it's like taking someone to Vegas. It's like, party! Like there's no rules, and what happens in Ottawa stays in Ottawa, and it's just kind of, we kind of do this life because we feel this pressure to cram a month's worth of time into 36 hours. We feel this stress, we feel this pressure, the anxiety to cram a month's worth of time into 36 hours. And what we've realized over 8 years is what it should have only taken us about 8 minutes to realize, and that is, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You can't plan quality time. You can't buy quantity time. You can't go on a vacation and make it be quality time. You can't structure it. You can't schedule it. What I've learned, and I've seen it play out in the lives of so many different families, but I've experienced it deeply in our own home, is this. Quality time is a blessing that comes out of quantity time. Quality time is a blessing. It's a happy accident that comes out of quantity time. But unfortunately for us, Lisa and I don't have the luxury of quantity time. We don't have the luxury of quantity time, and many of you know what that feels like, and you've experienced it, and so like us, you're kind of constantly aware that you only have but so much time. We recognize we only have so many hours with Emma, and so consequently, we feel stress, we feel pressure, we feel anxiety, and so rather than just simply enjoying the time that we have with Emma, it's full of stress and pressure, and it's go, 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 and we have come to realize the hard way, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work, and I've seen this play out in our lives, and I've seen it play out in the lives of so many families over the years, and sadly, in so many relationships between parents and their children, because again, you can't plan quality time, and you can't buy quantity time, and you can't schedule it. Quality time is a blessing that comes out of quantity time, and the only way to ensure that you and I create quality time is by choosing. It's by choosing to create more quantity time. The only way that you and I, as parents or as adults in the lives of children, the only way to ensure that you and I create quality time is by, and this is so important, choosing to create more quantity time. And in order to make that choice, that means that you have to say no to something. It may be a good opportunity. It might be a promotion. It might be a pay raise. It might be an incredible experience. It might be an incredible opportunity. It may be to go and do something wonderful. But in order to make more quantity time with those people that you would say matter the most to you, specifically your children, it's going to require you to choose to make more quantity time. This is incredibly, incredibly important. And again, I've seen this play out in so many families and so many relationships over the years. You have to say no to something good in order to say yes to what's great, or yes to what's the best. To put it another way, what you do with your time in the life of a child means more and will do more for that child than anything else you do. What you do with your time in the life of a child means more and will do more for that child than anything else you do, anything else you provide, anything else you give, any experience you submit them to. And and again, myself included in this, we get this backwards so many times. And over the years, as I've watched so many different parents parent, one of the things that I see is just this lack of understanding of these ideas, of these principles. And so they bury their heads in their careers, and they bury their heads in their hobbies, or they bury their heads in the hobbies and extracurricular activities of their kids, oftentimes with the best of intentions, right? It's like, I want to I want to provide for my family. I want to provide for my child. I want to give them great opportunities. I want to give them and expose them to great experiences. I've heard so many parents say, I've even found myself saying it over the years, I want to give my kid everything that I didn't have when I was a kid. And so they work themselves to the bone. They work crazy hard and work super long hours, and then think that they can take their family on an outing or take their family on a vacation and somehow make up for all that lost time. And it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And you can fool yourself into thinking that's possible, but you just can't make up, and I can't make up for lost time. If you think about it another way, your child or kids don't recognize that what you're doing in their life this week, is actually a formative part of their history. Kids don't see that. Kids don't see that what you're doing this week in the life of your children is actually being a formative part of the history because they're just kids. They just see now, right? They just see now. To them, you're just playing on the trampoline. To them, you just took them to swimming lessons. To them, you just maybe led a small group at Bridge Kids. Or to them, you just went for a walk as a family, or you watched a movie, or you ate some pizza, or you shared a Bible story with them, or you read some stories to them before they went to bed and you tucked them in at night. To them, you just sang and danced with them at Bridge Kids Kids Camp, or you just, cleaned up their laundry, whatever, you just cleaned up after them. Even teenagers, you do that. But they're just kids. They're just students. They don't recognize that what you're doing is a formative part of the history, but you and we are adults. And because we're adults, we're able to see yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And because of that, we should be able to see that by being present in a child's life week after week, you and I are actually making history. That by being present in the life of a child week after week after week, you and I are actually making history. And it's a history that will one day be part of the story they tell. Just like the story you tell is full of people who were or were not present in your life. And those decisions that those people made were a formative part of the story you find yourself telling. Mom was never home, dad was never home, or mom and dad were always there. Part of who you are was shaped by the decisions that other people made with their time and what they did with their time over time. To say it another way, let me go back. Rome, as they say, wasn't built in a day, right? I mean, I know that's cliche and like, wow, Scott, that's really cheesy, but that's true, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome was built over 365,000 days. Rome was built over 365,000 days with intention and purpose, and that is how you and I make history. So we have to get past the temptation to take shortcuts. We've got to get past the temptation. We've got to get beyond the lie that says we can just live our lives and go, and somehow make up for the missed or the lost time. Because the truth is, and again, this is something that I've experienced and learned the hard way, and I've seen it play out in so many different families, there's no such thing as instant faith. There's no such thing as instant character, and there's no such thing as instant relationship. The secret is time over time. The secret is time over time. That when what you do this week is repeated next week, and when what you do next week is repeated the week after that, you begin and I begin to earn credit in someone's life. And because the secret is time over time, that's why it's so important for you and I to keep time in the forefront of our minds. We have to keep it in the forefront of our minds, and hopefully that will help us to make some wise decisions. Now, Moses knew this to be true. Moses, a great leader, a great pillar in the Old Testament. Moses is a man who many of us, if not all of us, have heard of to varying degrees. Moses actually prayed about this very thing. And we find his prayer in the book of Psalms, specifically Psalm chapter 90. And when Moses is praying, he's not praying about his kids. He's not praying as a parent. He's actually praying as the leader of a nation. And as he's praying, he prays this incredibly profound prayer in Psalm chapter 90. And I just want to look at one specific verse that he prayed because I believe it's incredibly powerful and practical as it relates to you and I as parents or you and I as adults who have the opportunity to make an impact and imprint in the life of a child. So here's what he prays. In Psalm chapter 90, verse 12, Moses prays, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Moses prays, God, teach us, teach me, teach my people, teach this entire nation, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. So the question I ask as I read that prayer, as I read through that text is, how does numbering your days give you a heart of wisdom? And that's a great question. I believe that numbering your days helps you to kind of keep a healthy pace. I think if you and I could get to the place where we numbered our days, it would help us kind of narrow our focus and guard the margins. I think if you and I could get to the place, if we could learn, if we could be taught to number our days, it might help us to value quantity interaction with our kids. And it may help us to become more intentional with what we do with the time that we have. All of those things, I believe, help us gain points in the wisdom category, right? I mean, it just makes sense that if you could see how many days you have left with your kids, you'd stand a better chance of making those days count, right? So Moses, in praying, not for his children or not praying as a parent, prays for an entire nation. He says, God, teach us. Teach us to live in such a way that we would be continually mindful, that we would continually prioritize what really matters as opposed to allowing the immediate or oftentimes just frivolous things in life to preoccupy or cloud our judgment. That God, would you teach us to number our days, because if you could do that, God, we would gain a heart of wisdom. So, there are 936 marbles in this jar. 936 marbles. I know this to be true. I've been scared to death of knocking them over. There are 936 marbles in this jar, and you might be wondering, Scott, what's the significance of that? 936 is the estimated number of weeks between birth and high school graduation. 936 is the estimated number of weeks represented in this jar, the number of weeks between birth and high school graduation. How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? My guess is it depends on whether or not you're a parent. My guess it depends on how old your children are on that scale between birth and high school graduation. If you're anything like me, it's a little bit sobering. You kind of had a feeling in the pit of your stomach. What would happen if you had a jar like this in your home? What would happen if you had a jar like this, just like this, in your home? What would happen if you had a jar like this in your home that represented each child in your home? What if you had a jar like this that represented each child in your home, and you did some calculations to figure out how many marbles you would have in each jar? Could that be a way for you to allow God to teach you how to number your days? I believe it could. Could it be a way for you as a parent to gain wisdom, or you as an adult in the life of a child to gain wisdom? I believe that it could. Because when you see how much time you have left, you feel the weight and the responsibility to do more with the time that you have now, right? When you see how much time, when I see how much time we have left, you feel the weight and the responsibility to do more with the time you have now, and my guess it would lead to wiser decisions as it relates to what you do with the time that you have remaining with your kids. Now, my guess is some of you that are parents, you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, that is a stupid idea. Like, I'm so glad that I came to church today and heard this depressing message about how much time I have or don't have with my kids anymore, right? You might be thinking that, and that's true. I guess there's a bit of a downside to this whole thing. I was building it up, and now it's not so sure. And, it might lead to some things like depression and anxiety and guilt and drinking and all that other kind of stuff. But consider the alternative. Consider the alternative to this. I mean, what do? Do you just live in utter denial? Do you just kind of put your head in the sand and say, my kids are never going to grow up, and they're always going to eat Happy Meals, and they're never going to care about how I dress, and they're never going to ask about dating or never ask me for the keys to the car? I mean, what do you do? How could you find a balance between just living in complete denial where you just binge Netflix all day, every day, living in that complete, utter denial that your kids are going to grow up and move on and move out one day, and the sheer panic that creates that makes you just want to keel over and chug an entire Costco-sized bottle of Pepto-Bismol? I mean, what if there was a balance between those two reactions? Now, I want you to hear me really clearly. I'm not saying that you have to make every second count. And I'm not saying that you have to turn every minute or every moment into a teaching opportunity. And I'm not saying that you need to create this journal where you write down everything that you do and everything that you say, and every night you evaluate yourself and grade yourself as to how you're doing. I'm not saying any of those things, but what I am saying is that you need, and I need, wisdom as parents. That you need and I need wisdom as we are present in the lives of some children because of the opportunity and the responsibility that we have to make an imprint and an impact on their lives. We need wisdom. And Moses, I believe, gives us incredible insight as to how to gain wisdom. And he says, if you could just number your days, God, if you could teach us to number our days, we would gain a heart of wisdom. So rather than putting undue pressure on yourself, and rather than stressing out and thinking about every moment of every day and just living with this like, oh, I'm not doing a good job and I'm failing as a parent, what if you, and rather than just kind of putting these unrealistic expectations upon yourself, what if you just made, and I just made, a simple decision? We just made a simple decision, and it's simply this: to make history 1 week at a time. If we just made the decision to make history 1 week at a time, because the truth is, newsflash, you're already making history. So the question you should ask yourself is it a history worth making? Is it a history worth talking about? Is it a history worth repeating? Because when you get, and I get to the place where we learn to number our days, it will help us emotionally, mentally, practically, spiritually. It'll help us as we make decisions about what really, really, really matters. And each week will matter more when you see it in the context of how many weeks you have left with your kids. Each week is just going to matter more when you see it in the context of how many weeks you have left with your kids before they move on and they move out to whatever's next for them. And so as we wind down this morning, I put some numbers together for you. And this took a little longer than it should have, I'll be honest. But Lisa and I recognize that we have somewhere between 260 and 208 weeks left with Emma before she graduates high school. And that's a sobering thought for me. And we recognize that we have a little over 884 weeks left with Parker, and if he's anything like his dad, it's probably more like 995 or something like that before he graduates. But that's us. What about you? How much time do you have left? How much time do you have left? What if you were to take a jar like this at home and you were to do some calculations as to how much time you have left with your kids? And what if you were to get to the place where, you made a special event every week as you took one of these marbles out? At the end of every week, you took one of these marbles out and you did a special event. Maybe you had a meal as a family and you kind of talked about, you taking a marble out and what that signifies and how their week was. Or what if you actually, when you took a marble out, you sat down with your kids and you prayed for them? Not like close your eyes and pray in your own head, but you actually sat down your son or you sat down your daughter and you said, son, sweetheart, I just want to pray for you. I want to pray for you, and you put your hand on their shoulder and you say, God, thank you for your child. Thank you for who they are. Thank you for the person that they're becoming. Thank you for what you've been doing in their lives. Thank you for this week, and you pray for their future. Or what if you get, maybe not marbles, what if you made it kind of bittersweet and you got some M&Ms and then the end of every week was bittersweet? Time may fly a little faster than it should, but what if you kind of did something like that, or you got some special marbles that represented or signified some special days, some special weeks, maybe certain birthdays or certain milestones in their lives, and you made this more of an event? My guess is, and I believe with all my heart, that over time you would recognize that you are gaining wisdom as you make decisions as a parent. And even more than this, the crazier thing is, you're actually parenting in the process, because you're showing your child how to prioritize time as you model it before them. Because the principle is this: it takes time over time to make a history worth repeating. It takes time over time to make a history worth repeating. You have an incredible opportunity. You have an incredible opportunity. Don't let it pass you by. Because if you are not intentional, I promise you it will pass. And you'll regret it for the rest of your life. So be wise and make the time that you have count. Now, what would happen if you did this? What would happen if you did this? Would you gain wisdom in your decision making? Would you learn to pace yourself differently? Would you gain some margin and really see, as you narrow your focus, the things that are really the priorities in your life? Would you become more intentional with the time that you have? I believe that you would. And what if we as a church did this? What if we as a church, what if we as a body, what if we as a community had this mindset? What if those leaders that serve in our Bridge Kids and our student ministry got to the place where they said, not like I'm on this week, but they recognized I have an opportunity this week to be present and make an imprint and an impact in the life of a child? What if we never had to ask for volunteers in Bridge Kids or our Remix student ministry again, because all of us felt this awesome responsibility and opportunity to be present in the lives of a few kids, whether we're parents or not. And we used our time, we leveraged our time over time to create and make a history worth repeating, that you could become a part of the story that someday a child or a student will tell. You have a tremendous opportunity. So I would encourage you, whether or not you're a parent or whether your kids have grown and gone, I would encourage all of you to consider connecting with Lisa or Chris, who oversees our student ministry, to just connect with them and just talk to them about the opportunity to make an impact and an imprint in the life of a child or the life of a student. Because the bottom line for today as we close out is simply this. We are all, every single one of us, we are all losing our marbles. Whether we like it or not, we are all losing our marbles. So I believe with all my heart that it's time to make them count. It's time for us to make them count.